why are these orphans rejoicing? Because gifts to the Dorms for Orphanages Fund of Heaven's Family have provided them with new homes. All right, welcome back. We're in Matthew chapter 12. We've just started this little story of Jesus' disciples going into the grain fields and picking the heads of grain and eating them raw. Good, healthy stuff, by the way. And when the Pharisees saw it, they criticized Jesus, saying, your disciples do what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath. Isn't it interesting that they didn't criticize them for stealing somebody else's grain? You might wonder why that is. Because under the law, it actually says this in the Pentateuch, under the law of Moses, that you're allowed to go into your neighbor's standing grain and pick what you want to eat right there, right then. You just don't take a bushel basket with you or a sack and, be loading up, harvesting his stuff. But anyone's allowed to go into his neighbor's standing grain and just have some food. That's pretty cool. So they weren't breaking the law in that respect. So how were they breaking the law? They were doing it on the Sabbath, and the Pharisees had determined that doing anything like what they were doing, harvesting, was a violation of God's prohibition to work on the Sabbath. Well, little did they know that the God who gave that commandment regarding forbidding work on the Sabbath was right there. And he wasn't mad, upset, angry, doing anything to stop them. And I think Jesus, being God in the flesh, knows what he's talking about. He knows why he gave that commandment, all right? And in fact, he'll say a little later on here, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. There's something much greater, than anything else that you imagine here. I am God who gave this commandment. But that's something to read down the line. So they're doing what the Pharisees think is unlawful, but obviously God did not think it was wrong to work to eat food on the Sabbath. Well, a lot of Christians these days aren't bothering with the Sabbath and so forth, and I'm not going to talk about that right now, whether it's right or wrong. I'm just telling you that there are some Christians who believe in keeping the Sabbath. Back maybe 100 years ago in our nation, it was much more common for people who profess to be Christians to keep a Sabbath. It's funny because they kept it on Sunday. The Sabbath isn't Sunday anyways. It's Friday night at sundown to Saturday at sundown, but they kept this Sunday Sabbath. And one of the things that many of them would prohibit, and you talk to your grandmother sometime if she experienced this, is that they'd prepare all the food on Saturday so no one had to do anything to prepare food on Sunday lest they transgress the Sabbath, And it was okay to eat on the Sabbath, they decided, and basically, I guess, because of things like this. There was no preparation involved. They just were picking the grains of wheat and eating them. You can debate about these things, and certainly the Pharisees and the scribes did. They had a whole list of laws of what was work and what was not work on the Sabbath. You can read in the New Testament, in the Gospels, about how so-and-so went about a Sabbath day's journey away, traveled about a Sabbath day's journey away. And the teachers of the law back in those days had determined how far you could walk on the Sabbath without it being work. And I think it was like 0.6 of a mile or something like that. After that, it was work. Okay, so all these things, all these laws, and so now Jesus is going to just very gently, humbly try to straighten them out as to, well, what is the truth here? Are they really breaking God's law? Is God angry? And what he should have said, I think, is, am I angry? Because I'm God, and I gave this law. But Jesus wasn't me, and so he said in verse number 3 of Matthew 12, have you not read what David did when he became hungry, he and his companions, how he entered the house of God and they ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those with him, but for the priests alone. He ate the showbread in the tabernacle, forbidden for anyone to eat but the priests. But it was okay. Obviously, God didn't punish him. Why? Because he had a need. That he and his men were running for their lives from wicked King Saul, and they were hungry. They needed some kind of sustenance. And obviously, it's more important to stay alive and eat some bread that would be forbidden under normal circumstances. And God's going to say, okay. As Jesus said, man wasn't made for the Sabbath was made for man. The motivation behind this is that God loves people and he wants them to rest. He doesn't want them slaving away, 7 days a week. He wants them to take some time off. He wants them to rest. That's what it's all about, All right. He gives a second example in verse 5. Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath, the priests in the temple break the Sabbath and they are innocent? Well, they're working on the Sabbath. Just like, pastors who tell their congregations to keep the Sabbath or keep the Sunday Sabbath, they got to still give the sermon on the Sabbath. It's work for them. They're breaking the Sabbath. It's like these guys have to work on the Sabbath in order to do all that God said. And so Jesus is saying, open your minds, for goodness sake. You guys are so focused on the little tiny picky-unish things, the letter of the law, but you're missing the spirit of the law. And can I just admonish me, and can I just admonish you, let's make sure we understand the spirit of the law. That is, look for the reason that God gave his laws. What was his ultimate intention in commanding what he commanded? What's he after? Does it really disturb? Was God, really up in heaven angry saying, you're picking grain, you're hungry and you're picking some grain on the Of course not. When, Jesus, thinking maybe he was tempted to pull his hair out at that point in time, saying, how could you guys be so blind to see God is not like that? He's reasonable. He loves people. And if people are hungry on the Sabbath and they just get something to eat, it's no big deal. That's not work. They're not breaking the Sabbath. Okay? And so in verse number 5, he says, or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple break the Sabbath and are innocent? But I say to you that something greater than the temple is here. Well, what do you think that was? Something greater than the temple. Well, Jesus himself. And I don't know why Jesus held back, but he kept it a little bit vague there. But we know what he meant. Okay? A lot of interesting stuff coming up here, and I can't wait to get together with you again and talk about it. See you next time.